He walked the same route every day, 6 days a week, rain or shine, with a canvas bag slung across his shoulder and a half-worn hat shielding his weathered face. The town called him Mr. Ray. Kids waved to him. Dogs barked at him. Some elders still left cookies by their mailbox. No one knew how long he'd been delivering the mail in Fairgrove. Some said since the 80s. Others said he never missed a step even after that heart thing. But no one asked about the medals, because no one knew he had them. Mr. Ray lived alone in a pale blue house on Maple Avenue. Neatly trimmed lawn, always with the flag raised, always at regulation height. On Sundays, he cleaned his boots. On Mondays, he started again. The post office gave him a retirement option 5 years ago. He declined. He said, "They still need mail." But in truth, he needed the silence. One Thursday morning, while sorting through the town's usual bundle, grocery ads, bank statements, magazines, he paused. A plain envelope, no return address, no stamp, just one word, handwritten, Raymond D. Walker. His breath caught. He stood there, unmoving, the world around him blurring as the postmaster called his name again. "Ray, you all right?" He nodded slowly. "Yeah, just dropped something." He tucked the letter deep into his bag and stepped outside. All day, the envelope weighed more than the rest of the mail combined. He walked past porches and schoolyards, waving with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Finally, when the route ended and the sun began to sink behind the silos, he sat on the back steps of the post office and opened the envelope. Inside, a single photograph, faded, worn. 12 young men in fatigues standing beside a tank. One of them, impossibly young, was him. On the back scrawled in pen, "We still remember Iron 6. Come home." His hands shook. He hadn't heard that name in decades. Iron 6. 37 years earlier, in the Kuwaiti desert, Sergeant Raymond D. Walker led a field transport crew through fire and smoke. They weren't special forces. They weren't front line. But they kept the gears moving, and in one night, when the convoy came under fire, they kept each other alive. Ray had carried Corporal Vicks on his back through half a mile of burning sand. He'd driven a deuce and a half with no brakes, using only gears and prayer. But when the war ended, he came home quietly. No parade, no welcome, just silence. He never spoke of it, not to his neighbors, not even to his brother. He became a mailman, and he kept walking. But now, someone remembered, and they wanted him back. He flipped the photo again. Underneath the message, a smudged address, Carter Hill Veterans Lodge. He hadn't been there in 25 years. He rose, stiffly. And for the first time in decades, he took the next day off. He ironed a clean shirt, and he packed the photograph. He stood in front of his closet for a long time. Finally, he reached up to the highest shelf and pulled down a small wooden box. Inside were things long forgotten. His dog tags, his bronze star, a cracked Polaroid of his crew. He added the letter. Then, without telling anyone, he drove north. The Carter Hill Veterans Lodge sat quietly beneath a canopy of oaks, an hour from Fairgrove. Not many came here anymore. The war stories had faded. The world had moved on. But inside, past the front desk in a hallway lined with plaques, sat 7 men playing cards. One of them looked up. He stood. "Ray?" Ray stopped, looked closer. It was Vicks, older, grayer, but unmistakably the same man he'd once carried through fire. Without a word, they embraced. Around them, chairs scraped, men stood. They gathered in a loose circle, weathered faces, misty eyes. Someone muttered, "Iron 6 rides again." And the silence said more than words ever could. That weekend, the lodge hosted its first gathering in years. Ray sat quietly in the back as old friends laughed, cried, and shared stories that had lived too long in the dark. When his turn came, he stood, hands shaking slightly. "I walked this country's streets for 40 years, but I carried you with me every step." There wasn't a dry eye in the room. That night, in his room at the lodge, he pinned his bronze star to the wall, right above his old carrier bag. Outside, the wind shifted, and the flag at Carter Hill flapped crisply, proudly, as if saluting the return of one of its own. Ray's decision to stay at the lodge wasn't instant. He told himself he was just visiting, that he'd be back to his route by Monday. But as the days stretched into a week, he didn't go back. He took long walks around the woods behind Carter Hill, sometimes alone, sometimes with Vix, who now limped but still remembered the rhythm of marching boots. The mailman's bag stayed packed. The town didn't question it. A new temp handled the Fairgrove route. People said they missed Mr. Ray's quiet nods, but assumed he was finally enjoying retirement. He wasn't resting. He was remembering. In the lodge library, beneath shelves of unread history books, Ray and the others laid out old maps. They found faded letters, crumpled photos, and medals no one had worn in years. It started small, Ray sharing the photo that brought him back. Then Vix showed a charred pocket knife with initials carved in. Then another veteran pulled a yellowed field log. "Remember this day?" They stayed up talking until dawn. No speeches, no structure, just stories, laughing, crying, healing. Ray started writing again. In a cheap spiral notebook, he penned everything he could recall, from basic training to the last day in the desert. "Who are you writing for?" Vix once asked. Ray looked up. "For the mailman who forgot his own address." 3 weeks later, a high school teacher from Fairgrove reached out to the lodge. She was organizing a Veterans Day assembly. She'd heard Mr. Ray might have something to share. Ray hesitated. Public speaking wasn't his thing. He preferred roots and routines, quiet moments, nod and move on. But Vic said, "They need to know who walked their streets." Ray agreed. He didn't wear a uniform, just a pressed shirt and slacks, his dog tags tucked under his collar, the school auditorium filled with restless students, most unaware that the man behind the podium had once faced live fire to save lives. Ray didn't talk about medals. He talked about carrying letters. He talked about the silence after war, and how the hardest thing wasn't surviving, it was living quietly afterward. "You don't need to wear a uniform to serve," he said. "Sometimes you serve just by remembering." The room was silent when he stepped down. Then, slowly, students rose to their feet. A standing ovation, one that Ray never expected, never sought. But it broke something open. The town of Fairgrove did something rare the following month. They named a bench in front of the post office after him. "In honor of Raymond D. Walker, a mailman, a soldier, a brother." Kids read the plaque. Elders paused a moment longer. Ray would sometimes sit there on Sundays, not in uniform, not in ceremony, just as a man. One afternoon, a young boy approached him. "My dad said you were in the war." Ray nodded. "Did it hurt?" the boy asked. Ray thought, then said, "Yes. But I had people who carried me when I couldn't walk." "Like your mailbag?" Ray smiled. "Exactly like that." Vix passed away that winter, peacefully in his sleep, surrounded by his family. Ray folded the flag at the service. He carried it alone to the lodge afterward and hung it above the old fireplace. The card table was quieter after that, the circle a little smaller, but the stories didn't stop. Ray made sure of it. He sent copies of his writings to the local library, to the school, and to anyone who asked. One summer, he took a call from a young Marine stationed overseas. The soldier had found Ray's story online. "Your words made me feel less alone," the Marine said. Ray didn't know what to say, so he just said, "Keep walking." In the final years of his life, Ray kept his route, not through streets, but through memories. He visited families of his fallen brothers. He told their stories with gentle reverence. He never asked for recognition. But people began to recognize him, at diners, at parades, in grocery aisles. Always the same whisper. "That's the mailman who walked with ghosts." On the day he passed, the entire town fell quiet. The flag at Carter Hill was lowered, and outside the post office someone placed an old mailbag on the bench. Inside it, one envelope, no return address, just one line in careful handwriting. "We still remember Iron 6,